Christianity. He is currently series editor of Edinburgh Companion to Global Christianity. While Professor Klaus Fiedler has been living and working in Malawi since 1992, Professor Fiedler has taught church history at Chancellor College, University of Malawi, and also Muzuzu University. He has also developed postgraduate research and has been an active publisher of many books. Let us see, clap hands for them. Professor Ross is with me here in the chapel, while Professor Klaus Fiedler is with us online. Let me invite Professor Kenneth Ross to take the floor to launch the book titled A Malawi Church History 1860 up to 2020. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Reverend Theo, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. And let me add my welcome to everyone, not only to this book launch, but to the 2021 series of research seminars at Zomba Theological College. It has to be admitted we're a little bit subdued as we seek to resist the advance of the pandemic here in Zomba. So we would have loved to have the chapel crowded out with people coming. However, we've had to restrict numbers to make sure that we have very good spacing. But this makes us all the more grateful that we have the online option, and great to welcome all those who are coming in online. I think it would always be an honor and a privilege to launch a book at the Zomba Theological College research seminar. But with this one, it's especially fitting because it is a book that has been created in Zomba. And there couldn't be a better place for it to have its first public appearance, but here in Zomba, and particularly at Zomba Theological College. But let me not lose time, because I'm going to straight away invite the illustrious co-author, Professor Klaus Fiedler, to tell us the story of the book. Klaus, what is the idea of this book, and how did it come to be written?
You all may know that I love books, and for me, every book has its own history. Often that story is a very long and sometimes tedious one, but for this book, it is the opposite, and all due to COVID-19. The story starts in December 2019. That's not long ago. Rachel and I were living in Mzuzu at that time, and Ken came to visit. And he had the idea that the two of us should write a church history of Malawi. And we agreed. We have been cooperating for many years so far. So we saw this as a slow project, 2 to 4 years maybe. We didn't specify. Then Rachel's sabbatical brought us to Zomba at the end of January. COVID-19 kept us here, and both of us. Ken and us, we like to meet for tea and discussions on books, etc. And we met regularly to discuss and promote our book project, reprints, new books, and we also talk about COVID is treating our widespread family in various parts of the world. And we worked on the McCracken Festschrift and soon turned our attention to the common book. And we met 3 times a week. Imagine, we could never have imagined it when we had the first plan. It was sometimes hard to keep the discipline, and it was sometimes even harder to keep the discipline of 3,500 words per chapter. But this discipline gave us strength, and we were grateful that while others are suffering from the virus and many tough restrictions, we can get away with it a bit easier. We have the possibility to meet each other in our houses. Now, this illness turned the long project into a short one, a quick one. And at the beginning, we had to make some editorial decisions, and it was much easier to do them face-to-face over tea than to make them by internet somehow on email. So we decided the book should be a textbook for all who teach and learn Malawi church history, and of course for everyone else who is interested in Malawi church history. And with 15 million Christians, we think we should find enough to sustain this. We had in mind the current researchers, students in various degree programs, from undergraduate to PhD. They all need a solid church history of Malawi. And if someone is to write them, why not us? The next decision was to make a periodization. Writing history lives by this. And we proposed, or we decided, that there should be 4 periods, 2 of 50 years, 1860 to 1910, ending at the missionary conference, and then 1910 to 1960, around independence. We didn't want to tie us to exact dates like Independence Day or so, but to the decades. And then follow 2 periods of 30 years, 1960 to 90 and 1990 to 20. Of course, all these changing points, the period points, are marking many important ages. And for the last period, we were there. So much of the material we had lived through. This decision took note of the fact that the church in the last 60 years was much bigger and much more diverse than it was in the first 100 years. So therefore, more space has to be allocated to those last 2 groups of years. Then we had to check on how to apply this to a textbook. And we came to the observation a semester has 14 weeks, if we discount the exams. So that means the book can have 28 chapters, plus an introduction and a conclusion. And this means if you teach the course in 1 year, 1 week, 1 chapter, or if you learn the course in 1 year, 1 week, 1 chapter. And a chapter has 1,500 words, plus minus a little, plus tables and pictures. This discipline really kept us on the straight line. The next decision was to make it a comprehensive church history. Comprehensive in the sense it should cover all years in Malawi, and it should cover all churches, without any judgment on which church is right or wrong, but covering them all. So you find, of course, CCAP and the Roman Catholics, but it's the first history where the Seventh-day Adventist Church is represented in the whole stream of history. The same applies to the Churches of Christ, and not to leave out the Zionists and the Baptists. All were to be there. Of course, we couldn't mention each of the 900 or more denominations which exist in Malawi, but we made sure that there are representatives of each group, so that even the small, non-named denominations can feel they are represented. We wanted the book to be comprehensive also in the fact that women get their important role properly portrayed, because in much of previous writings they have been either neglected, very much neglected. So this should be a different picture, and you will judge in the end if we have achieved it. The next issue was the sources. For the first 100 years, there were quite some books about the mainline churches, McCracken, Linden, and of course Shepperson on Chilembe and the surroundings. So this was a good starting point. But after 1960, there was not that much least not in the traditional way. And therefore, we made very much use of the sources which had been generated and are being generated by the research programs both at Chancellor College and at Mzuli. And this is a book where we want to pay homage to all those who have done the research, because without them, the book would have been very narrow and narrow-minded. So we made use of those books on the history of the Baptist Church, the first PhD I supervised on the Free Methodists. There are many others, just these are the early ones, to build up a history which is broad enough to cover all various expressions of the Christian faith in Malawi. And quite some research has not been published yet, or maybe these are BA papers which are valuable in their insights, but maybe not big enough for the book. So we used a lot of unpublished sources, and we are very proud of that, because this book is written by two authors, but it's based on the research of many who did the work before us, and some of them quite just recently and still around us. So my respect and my compliments to all of them, and our compliments. And then, in order to finish our editorial decisions, we had to look at layout. We decided the book should have more than 500 pages. Then there should be 28 lessons, of course, and everywhere there should be text boxes and pictures. Not too many and not exactly equally distributed, but whatever makes sense to illustrate and make the learning easier. And also the font size is not as small as we could have possibly made it to save paper. Then every chapter have a list of further reading, so that the students can go right away to the textbooks which they could, to the books which they could read otherwise. Then there is no need for the bibliography. Yeah, because there are 28 bibliography appropriate for the chapters. We also were very much aware that the textbook is not alone and to be alone. First of all, we were aware that there is already a source book on the sources of Christianity, Christian history in Malawi. And one of our first attempts was to update this book, to accept new input. And then in the Malawi church history, we related on page 43 to 5, the book which we put to sources which had been written before. We also decided in the future there will be a reader, because some of the articles we refer to are difficult to access even for a dedicated research. So we have decided to make a book of about 350 pages with 23 articles difficult to find in Malawi, but referred to in the church history, and 2 articles we had because we liked them. And yeah, this will be available during this year, we hope, but it has to be done. And just a day ago, when I saw a picture of Bowden Mission, I said there should be another book, a pictorial history of Malawi, a pictorial church history of Malawi. I know that is not my domain, but if anyone could take up that job, I would be happy to cooperate with my historical sources. And this is unique. A comprehensive national church history. We have tried to find in our memory, from our friends on the internet, etc., is there such a thing? And at least for Africa, we have never found a church history of one country which is comprehensive, or at least aims to be so. So we present this to the scholarly world, not only as a coverage of Malawi church history, but also as a new approach, that this is the aim, to have a comprehensive, full-scale history in one volume, covering all the years and all the expressions of the Christian. This book is also a celebration of God's history in Malawi. The missionaries came not long ago, and they found about 500,000 people. They tried to evangelize them. Not easy in the beginning, but they had success. Now the church in Malawi has over 15 million members. To finalize, this book is a thank you gift for the welcome which Ken and I received here, including our families. The book is also a gift of respect for all who, over a whole generation, did the research that made a comprehensive book like this possible. And finally, this book is a challenge. Promote theological publishing. There should be more monographs, more articles, and more textbooks. Church history is only one of the church disciplines. There's one in systematology, but there should be a textbook in Old Testament, in counseling, etc. I end my case, and I'm happy that I was allowed to be on this project and to write. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Klaus. And let me mention that there is going to be an opportunity for questions from the floor towards the end of the program. So if Klaus has said something that provoked a question in your mind, please hold it and bring it back at the end. Now, to have a life, a book needs authors, but it also needs readers. And we're very fortunate with this book that among the first readers of the book are Father Francis Bonongwe and Professor Wapulumuka Mulwafu. And we're going to hear from each of them what they have made of it. And so we'll begin with Father Francis, who teaches church history at St. Peter's Major Seminary here in Zomba, where he is also the Dean of Studies. And so someone who's very well placed to bring us an assessment of the new book. Please, Father. Perhaps those in the hall can give a welcome.
Thank you very much, Professor Rossi. As Professor Rossi has said, I teach church history at St. Peter's Major Seminary since 2016 November. It is a pleasure to be in this book launch, where we are launching a book by two great professors, Professor Rossi and Fiedler. For nearly 4 years, it has always been my greatest desire to hold a book in my hands which gives a picture of the Christianization of Malawi. And this book, A Malawian Church History, 1860 to 2020, has filled a very big gap that has been there for over 100 years plus. And I wouldn't be wrong to call this book self-contained. Why is it self-contained? Because it tells the whole story. I know that different denominations have their own histories regarding their presence in Malawi. I have read a number of them, but this book answers one of the major questions in Malawi's Christian heritage. And that question is, how did Malawi become Christian? By reading this book, one will know who opened up the way for the Christian faith in Malawi. One will know the forefathers, the local forefathers for that matter, of the Christian faith, who without them, maybe the story would have been different. By reading the book, one will know how the Christian faith has developed in Malawi. In summary, by reading the book, one will know the story of the Christian faith in Malawi. So the book takes you from the time of Dr. David Livingstone, whom John Ball calls the Pathfinder, who together, Livingstone, with his European colleagues, but in close collaboration with the African brothers and sisters, to our own times, where now 80% of the Malawian population is Christian. So the book captures the whole story from Livingstone to our own times of what Christianity is, how it has developed in Malawi. It is a book that looks at Malawian church history from an ecumenic perspective. It doesn't highlight historical achievements of one particular denomination, while exaggerating the weaknesses of the other. It is a book that is very ecumenical in its approach. And this book reminds me of the words of Pope Leo XIII in his letter on historical studies, Sebe Numero Considerantes, of 18th August 1883. Pope Leo reminded Catholic historians that the first rule of history is not dare affirm anything false, nor to silence something true, so that in writing there are no suspicions of partiality or hostility. Chapter 7 of this book, which is charisms, committee, competition, and cooperation, is a very good example of how a good church historian should present facts, historical facts, without bias and without hostility. It's a book that takes all the expressions of the Christian faith in Malawi without making any judgments whether this group is true to the sacred scriptures or whatever, but it gives us really a very good picture on how the Christian faith came through these different denominations and how they have impacted on the life of Malawians. So as a teacher of church history, I strongly recommend the book, that it should be a book that every teacher of church history must have. I would agree with Apau, who says that it is a book that every institutional and personal library should have, because it is a book that tells the story of the Christian faith in Malawi, how it came, how it has been lived, and how it has been developed. So I conclude by saying that this book teaches students of church history in Malawi must have, and unfortunately, I already have it. Thank you very much.
I think I will follow a convention for a book launch, which is that as well as hearing about the book, there should be some readings from the book. So I'm going to just take 2 or 3 selected readings. The first one was slightly alluded to by Father Francis. At the end of each of the periods, Klaus mentioned the book is divided into 4 periods. And so at the end of each, we tried to summarize what was the situation at the end of this particular period. It was a difficult task, I must say, but I'd like to read the paragraph that summarizes what was the situation of Christianity in Malawi by the year 1910. And this is our 1-paragraph answer. Christianity in Malawi in 1910 was characterized by charisms, comity, competition, and cooperation. A variety of Christian traditions had established themselves, each bringing their distinctive charism to the mosaic. Comity arrangements were meaningful only among the 3 Presbyterian missions and between the 2 Catholic ones. Otherwise, it was more a matter of competition, with the different missions competing for members and a head-on confrontation between the Protestant and Catholic missions. The Federated Board of Missions provided a forum for cooperation among most of the Protestant churches, which bore fruit in a shared Bible and hymn book, as well as a united front in dealing with the government, especially on educational matters. Significantly, every strand of the Christian presence was now growing rapidly. From 1860 until 1895, the numbers of Malawians taking an active role in the churches was very small. By 1910, large numbers had become involved. The church in Malawi was a reality, and leaders were emerging within it, who would deepen and broaden its appeal in years to come. But we're going to move right away to our next reader of the book, who is Professor Wapulumuka Mulwafu, who has been teaching history for many years at Chancellor College here in Zomba, where he is also the Dean of Postgraduate Studies. So few people, I think, have a broader picture of Malawi's history and the historiography that we have in Malawi than Professor Mulwafu. So we're very grateful that he can be with us this afternoon, joining online and I'll invite him to tell us what he has made of the book.
Once again, so what I was trying to do was to contextualize this book within the broader historiography of Malawi. And my observation is that there's great need writing history books on different themes, different topics on Malawi. But at the same time, what we don't have comprehensive books that provide a detailed analysis of developments that have taken place across time and space, kind of books that provide information which can enable someone to have a deep understanding of the history of Malawi. We do have different publications on different parts of the country and different historical periods. So in looking at the existing publications, John McCracken's History of Malawi stands out to be one such comprehensive book. And so I see, therefore, the publication by Ken Ross and Klaus Fiedler as fitting in that category, that it has tried to analyze the development of Christianity in Malawi from the earliest times to the present, but at the same time, they do not just focus on one Christian group, but they do look at the different groups, the Catholics, Anglicans, and the others, Presbyterians that worked in Malawi. So I think in that regard, it's a very rich publication, and one which is going to be very, very valuable to students and researchers on Malawi's history. Yeah. So next. Okay.
Yep.
So what I've also observed is that the two authors have departed from the now familiar tradition of writing histories based on, as I said, maybe one part of the country or maybe one time period. But for this one, we have a one-stop account, which helps in understanding the church history of Malawi as a whole. And obviously, in writing this kind of book, one of the challenges that I was very keen to look at is the whole idea of trying to make generalizations without detailed analysis. Sometimes this can be a big problem if one just wants to look at the bigger picture, but without looking at the dynamics that took place in different local contexts. But for this one, what I noted is that Ross and Fiedler have meticulously put together detailed treatment, whilst at the same time also discerning some of the broader trends to account for the church enterprise in Malawi. So there's that kind of balance, and it's a book that is interesting to read, but at the same time, you get the kind of information that can enable one to understand Malawi's church history. So as I'm saying that the result is that we have a well-crafted narrative of the church history in Malawi, and which highlights in an analytical manner both the past and present developments of church history. So from the time of the early missionaries and up to the present time, when the church has actually developed, and we have also Pentecostal churches. So I think the next one, oh yeah. One unique aspect of this book is the effort that has been made by the authors to try and relate the whole history to the entire presence of Christianity in Malawi. The story is well recounted, and you don't necessarily miss any aspect of the Christian groups that operated in the country. So I think for that one, the authors should be commended because it's quite rich in that regard. And in my analysis, there hasn't been any publication on Malawi's church history using this kind of approach. I stand to be corrected, but I haven't come across any publication which is developed with such degree of breadth. So this therefore places this publication in its own, it makes this publication to be interesting and useful because it has those details. As I said, also it strikes a balance in covering issues relating to both the mission activities but also African agency, so that you don't just find the actors, the players being the missionaries alone, but you also have the Africans as well participating in the unfolding history of the country. So this is also quite interesting. But at the same time, I found it quite interesting that the authors have been able to bring up some pieces of evidence which do emphasize some of the conclusions made. You have pictures and you have some texts from the contemporaneous writers and which have been brought into the book. So I think that again is quite interesting. Next slide.
Yes.
Yeah. Apart from the didactic value of this publication, it remains an essential companion for teachers and students. And I think this point was also highlighted by the previous speaker, Father Francis, that it's filling an important gap in historical scholarship in Malawi. And the authors themselves have made the point that church history of Malawi is closely related to the history of the nation. And I think this cannot be disputed, the fact that the birth of the nation of Nyasaland, or the colony of Nyasaland, or the birth of the independent nation of Malawi is in many ways also related to the development of church history. And the church has been quite instrumental in the development of Malawi nation. So I think that point is quite clear and has been well articulated. Also by addressing some of the issues that are not often covered in mainstream historical scholarship, such as African initiative, African agency, Christianity and spirituality, a little bit use of statistics, and the book is taking us to a new level of understanding the origins and impact of church history in Malawi. So I think that that approach has been effectively done in the book, and it makes it quite interesting, but also valuable. Next slide.
Yes.
Yeah, the next.
Yeah, the assessment of the book.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Now commenting on presentation language, the book is highly accessible, and it's kind of book which would be make it quite easy for readers to follow the developments that have taken place in Malawi's church history. And also, I think it's a book which can be used by both scholars, students, and even individuals that are interested in trying to understand the church history of the country. But like I said earlier on, also the inclusion of captions, testimonies, pictures, portraits drawn from original sources. I think this is very helpful to getting a bigger picture of the church history. So it's a captivating book to read. Yeah, next.
Okay. Yep. Comment on organization of the book?
Yes. Yeah. I will not spend much time on this one because I think it has been highlighted by earlier speakers. But just to mention that the book has been conveniently divided into 4 sections. And what I found interesting is that in history, it's very common sometimes to categorize the history of Malawi along colonially demarcated phases, the pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial periods. And this is very convenient and easy for history, but the authors have departed from that, and instead there are 4 sections which span over, even sometimes cross those historical divides. And for example, the first section, founding charisms, and covering the period between 1860 and 1910. So I think I don't have to go into the details about that. We can move on to the next slide.
Yes. Organization of the book.
Yes, continuing, that's continuation. Yeah, section 2, again, from missions to church. That again is quite an interesting period in the sense that we see the transformation of the missionary church and to the establishment and consolidation of churches in Malawi. So it's a period which also coincided with the rise of African nationalism, and obviously the church played an important role in that. And so then the third section, which looks at the growth and expansion of churches, and marked by tendency towards Africanization and independency. And then finally, the 4th section covering the contemporary phase, 1990 to 2020, where the church has not only come of age, but has also become a formidable force in Malawian history. And particularly prominent themes during this section, this period, is the rise of Pentecostalism, and also the church's role in the governance of the country. So these are important themes in trying to understand also Malawi's history more generally. Next slide, please.
Conclusion.
Yes. All right. So in conclusion, therefore, what Ross and Fiedler have done in this book is to reaffirm the odd belief that history can be written from different angles, and which cuts across the entire spectrum of human experience. And so in this case, what we see is the religious experience, and it's role in the, as I said, the development of Nyasaland, the development of Malawi, but also society more generally. The focus of this book, therefore, it's very, very important that we use it in teaching, and so that our students and our researchers can have this full understanding of Malawi's history. So I'm also making a comment to say that both Fiedler and Ken Ross may not be professional historians, but they have, what they have done is a major contribution towards understanding Malawi's history. It's useful, it's an important academic contribution to our history. And so I would therefore like Father Francis recommend this one to the general audience, but also to different academic institutions to use it in the teaching of different programs. Thank you very much.
Blair, and thank you both to Professor Mulwafu and Dr. Bertrand for conjuring up a way for us to see the PowerPoint. Those of us who are in the chapel at ZTC, which I know many of you can imagine, are enjoying the blessing of rain, which also makes it a bit harder to hear, but we're doing our best. And we're going to now slightly reduce the readings from the book, simply because time is marching on, and I do want to give the promised opportunity for questions to any of the presenters or to the panel as a whole. But I'm going to read just one more passage so that we hear from the book itself. And it was mentioned by Professor Mulwafu that, as well as some passages like the one I read earlier, where we tried to summarize, to give a general summation of what was happening in any particular period, we've also tried to have some vivid passages, just short descriptions of an episode or an incident that capture something important about the story of the church in Malawi. And we've sometimes used these to highlight dimensions of the story that have sometimes been neglected in the wider historiography. One of these is about women who've played a huge role in Malawian Christianity, but it's often had little recognition. And another major feature of the story is music, which again often has not had much recognition, while on the ground it's been playing a very big role. So this is a little passage that brings together these two themes, the theme of women and the theme of music. And it's a passage that comes from a Canadian missionary called Clara Henderson, who writes about an occasion when she made a visit to a Mvano group within the Synod of Blantyre. And this is what we have in our text box. After ushering us into the house of our host, the women continued singing and dancing in a circle outside, moving counterclockwise and altering their dance patterns in accordance with the songs they were singing. Their songs were punctuated by ululation and laughter, and I continued to watch them through the window as we had our hot tea and buns, wondering how a translated European hymn had come to be transformed in such a way. Later, I discovered that they had been singing Nyimbo 369, "There is a stranger at the door, let him in," a translated hymn originally from Ira Sankey's Sacred Songs and Solos. This was the beginning of my fascination. So Clara was fascinated. Klaus and I have been fascinated. We hope that through the book, perhaps others will come to be fascinated by the very rich story of church life in Malawi, and that this will be a platform for much more of it to be explored and described and analyzed and elaborated.
But all, yes, sure, thank you. First of all, thank you very much to all the presentations. They were really good and riveting. In passing, I'd like to say that I've had the privilege of reading Augustine Musapoli's text, and I really hope that it comes to publication in some form or another series. But my question is to the two authors, and it's about your choice of cover, which I found a bit surprising in the whole book. What it showed, for those who haven't seen it, was a group of white people giving a group of young Malawian people tea, and a very European tea. And it struck me quite a strange sort of way to introduce your whole book, because it seems to be almost the opposite of what your book is trying to say, that the role of the Africans in this is very passive, and what they're receiving is very much European culture rather than the religion. I just wondered why you chose that rather than something a bit more obvious.
Well, thank you very much, David. I think I will offer a light-hearted answer. Maybe depend on Professor Klaus for the serious answer. My light-hearted answer is I once heard a radio interview with Alexander McCall Smith about his books on Mara Motswe of Botswana. And the question he got asked on the radio was, why did Mara Motswe have tea so often in the books? And he said, well, when he was writing the book and he couldn't think of anything else to happen, then he made them have tea. And we had a lot of tea in the course of writing this book. But Klaus, seriously, why is there a tea party on the front of this book?
Where's my phone? Yeah, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, yes, you're clear.
We had first of all a thought of putting one of the Moor pictures, the Moor mural pictures on, with the missionaries arriving under the baobab tree there. Very well done and so on. But this picture fascinated us more because it is something which you don't expect. I know a lot about church history, but I had not expected this to provide a tea party for the girls in school in 1888. That was before colonial rule came. Yeah? And they were all inviting, with the head of the mission standing there in front and giving dinners, girls who were at school. You see, I'm not in the danger of generalizing, but this was an unexpected picture, and I don't think it would have happened in, let's say, the German missions around the same time. Because this picture shows the value the missionaries gave to the African children and their parents, of course, to Africans as a whole, as equal. They deserve the best they can offer. It is not an attempt in any way to make Malawians less Malawian. Missionaries didn't try it. But to give them something which is more than just what the world was offering them, to elevate them. And I appreciated this picture very much. Yeah. Maybe I can find some other answers, but this was the first reaction.
At the same time, we realize not everyone has funds available. We do want the book to be available to everyone. So we would like to launch the book by contributing copies to the library, the Zomba Theological College Library. And we're delighted that Mrs. Jane Makupete is here today to receive the books on behalf of the library. So Jane, could I ask you to come forward and receive the books? Yeah, sure. Jane, I need to ask you to come round into the front of the camera so that people can see you. And I noticed that our vice principal of the college is here, so perhaps he could also represent the college for this little ceremony. So we ask Jane and the Vice Principal, Reverend Chibowa, to receive these books and make sure that they go safely to the library and they're available for the students of today and tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ross and Professor Ken Fiedler. So Klaus Fiedler, not Ken. Ken Ross and Professor Klaus Fiedler. Thank you very much, everyone, to participate. And to close, let me invite Reverend Wible Tembo to come and close with a word of prayer.
Let us pray. Our dear Heavenly God, we come before your presence this hour with all gratitude, magnification, and adoration to your name because of this wonderful and beautiful event of the book launch from these two authors. Father God, we ask you to continue guiding them, giving them more wisdom so that they can continue with their regular research, as you are also helping us all who are going to read these books. In Jesus Christ's name, we also pray that we should have that vigor of having an element of doing research, element of knowing new things all the time, more especially in this sector of history of Christianity. We know without history, we cannot go anywhere. Therefore, this history written in this newly launched book should help us all. In the mighty name of our Lord Jesus Christ, until we meet again, we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much, everyone. That marks the end of today's book launch.